Welcome to our presentation about the scholarship of teaching and learning. I'm Lizzie Santiago. I'm a teaching associate professor within the College of Engineering. I've been at WVU for 9.5 years, okay? Co-organizing and co-presenting this presentation, we have Dr. Marina Galvez Peralta from the School of Pharmacy, and we also have Dr. Amy Morwood from the College of Education, okay? So what you are going to see is that we are going to basically be transitioning from one presenter to the other, okay? But you guys are also going to be involved in the brainstorming portions of this presentation, okay? So for this presentation, keep in mind that this is the first of a series of presentations that we have been developing, all associated to the scholarship of teaching and learning, okay? So what it means truly is that please stay tuned, because there will be other presentations on topics such as survey methods, why do we need an IRB to do educational research, publishing your SoTL projects, okay, and how to fund your SoTL project, okay? In terms of this presentation, what we want to convey in general, okay, is the following information, okay? We are going to define for you what is SoTL, or Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, okay? We're also telling you what is not SoTL. We're going to go briefly over some of the components of an SoTL project. Keep in mind that we're talking about research questions, theoretical framework, experimental plan, where to publish, and we're also going to basically, as I said, we are having some questions that we want you guys to participate on, okay? Okay, guys, in terms of what is a scholarship of teaching and learning, if we take a look at the first item, you will see that truly the ultimate goal of SoTL is to improve student learning, okay? It's a systematic reflection on teaching and learning made public, okay? So when we're talking about scholarship of teaching and learning, is not doing research within the context of the classroom. It's truly also how do you present your work? How do you basically disseminate your findings? It's a growing discipline dedicated to taking teaching and learning as a serious intellectual work. So in the same way that you see research within your context of your main research topic, okay, where you were trained, for instance, I happen to be a neural tissue engineer, okay? In the same way, with the same rigorosity that I do research on neural tissue engineering, okay, I can do research, okay, associated to my teaching and my student learning, okay? It uses discovery, reflection, and evidence-based methods, okay, to research effective teaching and student learning. Keep in mind that most of you spend hours and hours in a classroom, okay? For me personally, I see the classroom as a source of inspiration. I'm constantly interacting with students. I get a lot of feedback from students. Sometimes it's good feedback, sometimes, well, all feedback is good, even though we may not like the feedback that we get, okay? But we get a lot of information in general, okay? And what you're going to see is that within the context of your classroom, there are a lot of variables, okay, that affects the way that you interact with students, affect the way that students learn in general, okay? So there is an almost infinite number of research questions, okay, associated to those variables that are inherent in the context of the classroom, the context of the teaching, the context of the logic of your topic, okay, the logic of student reasoning, and in the context of learning in general within the classroom. So what is not SoTL? Okay, keep in mind that performing a research project that is not grounded on theory, okay, and we're going to talk about the framework in a few minutes, okay, this is not scholarship of teaching and learning. We're always grounded on theory. Implementing a survey in a class and not proposing solutions to the original problem, that's not SoTL, okay, you're basically beginning, but you're not getting there. Implementing a survey in class without the appropriate IRB approval, okay? Every time that you do a research project within the context of your classroom, you should have some sort of IRB approval, okay? And conducting research on a topic that has been extensively published, okay? That's not SoTL, okay? And I have to emphasize for this one, there is a lot of literature on flipped classrooms, okay? So you truly have to search for what is truly unique, okay, and new within the context of a given topic that you want to investigate, okay? So once you develop the idea, you have to do some sort of background research, okay, to be sure that this topic has not been already researched extensively and your questions have not been answer. Benefits of engaging in SoTL research, okay? Keep in mind that you're going to end with better student outcomes, better student learning, okay? It brings faculty development opportunities in general, okay? It increases reflection on teaching and learning by you guys, okay? And you're going to extend your network of interactions, okay? It provides research opportunities for students. I have had maybe this semester, I have 2 students doing research. Okay, they are both undergraduate students. Previous semester, I have had grad students working on my projects. Okay, so I see it in the same way that I see my neural tissue engineering projects. Okay, I haven't done it in some time. Okay, but in the same way that I used to see my neural tissue engineering related project, I see my SoTL projects. Okay, so with the same rigorosity, as I said. It creates a stronger overall faculty that values teaching and student learning. Keep in mind that you are going to learn so much. You're going to be puzzled. You're going to be surprised by all the amount of information is out there and everything that we truly think we know, but we don't know in terms of how to improve teaching. Okay? It provides useful information for assessment, program reviews, accreditation purposes. Provides scholarship opportunities in the form of presentations and publications for faculty. I just drove back from Cleveland right now, and I have a student presenting at 4 p.m., one of my projects. Okay, so you're going to see that, as I said, it's another form of teaching, and it will deepen your understanding of your classroom experiences and will definitely improve the way that you teach. Okay, may be useful in bringing outside funds. I've been funded by the NSF, okay, and strengthening internal budget requests, and renews faculty excitement about teaching and makes them more aware of how they teach. Everything is not pink, everything is not easy, okay? You're going to see that there are departments that they don't consider SoTL as true research. This is something that you have to truly discuss with your department head to see if this will count for P&T purposes. But we've been back and forth with this topic for some time, okay? But I highly encourage you to talk to your department head if you plan to engage on SoTL research to be sure that it counts. I will tell you that no matter what, for me, I do it because I enjoy it so much. And I gain so much, and my students basically also are the final ones in terms of gains in terms of knowledge, okay? And as I said, SoTL is not recognized as scholarship in some department, colleges, and universities, okay? Examples of SoTL topics. There are many, okay? So I just have a few of them highlighted. Active learning is a topic of research. Assessment, formative, summative, student learning, curriculum program. Cognition, I do research on critical thinking. Engagement, learning communities within the context of your classroom, motivation, service learning in the context of the classroom, technology in the classroom, writing in general. There are many topics, and I'm sure you can think in general and come up with other topics that we don't have in this list. So what I'm going to do right now is transitioning to the subtopics that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. So we're going to talk about the research question, theoretical framework, and experimental plan.
So for those of you who have not publishing yet, you need to identify something that hasn't studied that frequently, so you can be an innovator, creating your own path, rather than being a me too and following 100 million papers that have been already following like flipped classroom, right? So in order to do that, you need to follow up with literature. And I don't know how many of you are familiarized, but there are many, many publications, many journals out there that they are publishing on SoTL. Even if you are in a scientific background, in engineering or in agriculture or in physics or chemistry, most of the current national associations will have a subdivision that is focused on only education. And then the other thing is, in order to not be a me too, and you want to be an innovator, you have to find a gap that hasn't been, and that is what you are going to be implementing. So some of the examples of research question is, can I assess a methodology of teaching? Can I measure how my students are learning? Or can I measure how my faculty is changing the teaching and how that is impacting on them and on the students? For those of you who are in the health sciences, can we compare what happened in the practice versus what happened in the classroom? Or students' perceptions with now all the well-being and all the movement that we are having? How are students perceiving themselves? Do they feel confident when they are done? How are they doing with any other problems that could affect how much they are learning when we are teaching? Okay, so one thing that I learned with the years is that even all of us are from a diverse background and teaching in different disciplines, we are sharing the same common concerns or problems with classrooms. So sometimes when we brainstorm together and we share, maybe we can come up with even better ideas. So let's, if you don't feel shy about it, kind of yell at me. What is the kind of a keyword for your research question? Anybody?
Single word?
Or a whole sentence, I can write here.
Distractions.
Efficacy of interventions.
Is it efficacy?
Efficacy of interventions.
What else?
Learning and application.
So how theory translates to the real life? I don't know, it was an app, to make an application. A joke. What else?
Underperformance.
Underperformance. Knowledge retention?
Yes.
I'm there with you. Okay, so we're going to hold all these research questions because now that you are wondering or you identify a problem, now we're going to give you the path of what do we have to do next. And in order to do that, as we mentioned in the beginning, SoTL is only SoTL if we have a knowledge base, right? So Amy's going to follow up with that.
So I'm Amy Morwood, and I'm from CHS, Education and Human Services. So yes, I am the non-science brain in this grouping up here. And I found Teaching and Learning Commons through Celebrate. I'm just going to give you a little background. And I saw these ladies present, and I thought, that's my home. These ladies are talking my language. I understand what they're saying, and I want to be a part of that, okay? And so luckily they took me in, and here I am. And they gave me theory to talk about. So I don't know if that means they like me or they don't like me. But what we're going to talk about here is theory. And so because I'm in education I specifically teach teachers getting an advanced certification in reading specialists. So you'll see a lot of literacy things throughout my examples here. And I just wanted you to see how you can base it in your own discipline, okay? So I'm not really going to tell anybody in this room anything about theory that they don't know. This is really just a reminder of things. So a general definition of theory is a set of statements or principles devised to explain a group of facts or phenomena, especially one that has been repeatedly tested or widely accepted. And then in education, which is where I draw from, theory refers to a well-documented explanation for a phenomenon related to teaching and or learning. There's two main theoretical frameworks here, behaviorism, and we'll talk about constructivism next. In behaviorism, there's the two underlying beliefs that behavior is the result of a stimuli, obviously, and external stimuli can be manipulated. And then there's the three areas that many of us have studied in a lot of courses, I'm sure, over time, which is classical conditioning, connectivism, and operant conditioning. So now we're going to get to the stuff that really relates to my work, so I can really lean into this stuff a little bit harder here. Constructivism is active construction of knowledge by individuals. You'll see that word active on a few of the previous slides. You'll see it come up again. We saw it in a few research ideas and things that you talked about here. Learning occurs when individuals integrate new knowledge with existing knowledge. And I think that really, in education, we really lean into that in our research. So some different types of constructivist theories, specifically ones that I've worked with, is inquiry. So inquiry is where the teacher leans in and looks. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here, where you're looking at your own work. You have developed a question, and now you're going to explore it in some way. It's usually done through multiple data sources. Schema theory is that idea of those file folders in your brain. Everything you connect to something, and everything you have puts in. I see some smiles, so I know I'm headed in the right direction here with this slide. So schema theory is those connections that you make with new information to existing information or experiences. Transactional reader response, that's probably more in my discipline area. But what we talk about with this is that when a reader interacts with a text, it's the interaction that they have with that text. And so whether that be an efferent or an aesthetic response to that text. So again, I don't expect you to take these theories and apply them in your disciplines, but I'm trying to give you some ideas on how we look at things differently. Metacognition is just self-regulation. And in literacy education, the way we would look at that would be how does a student comprehend text? So that's specifically what we're looking at. And then engagement really leans on metacognitive theory as well, but it talks more specifically about students' motivation and intrinsic motivation to, in my case, complete a reading task.
Now you have learned which type of knowledge you need to assess, and you identify an idea. So what is next? So the next is to think about how am I going to design my experiment, my classroom, so I can measure what I want it to look after. So if we are looking for distraction, for example, what am I going to look for? How am I going to see how my students are distracted or not? Will I be comparing different classes? Will I be comparing gender differences or age or background? So the problem that we have with education is that we cannot, for those of you who are in science, usually we'll have a control group and a case or intervention group, right? So let's say half of you, we are going to be assessing how, I don't know, exercise will help teachers' relaxation. So half of you will be exposed to that, and some of you will be controlled, right? An intervention. In the classroom, it's a little challenging because if you are thinking that your intervention is beneficial, you don't want to jeopardize and say, well, I don't want to sacrifice that control group that I know that they are missing something. So it won't be ethical, right? So there are some approaches in literature that they suggest either you compare when you are owning, let's say, and those are a couple of examples. You are teaching 2 semesters and you have the same population of students. So you may want to have a baseline, a control, when you don't have the intervention. And then on the next semester, assuming that the course that you are teaching are equally difficult, then you can try to implement that intervention on the second semester and compare the outcomes. Or you can do within 1 semester, maybe half of the semester without changes, and the second half with changes, right? And you compare. The third approach is when you are having a subgroup of your class with no intervention, a subgroup of your class with intervention, and then you flip them. So basically, each of them are going to be beneficial. They will be beneficial in different part of the material that you are implementing, but they will be, each of them will be their own control. So those are the examples stated there. The other thing that we are looking at is that we are looking at students, we are looking at individuals, right? And in order to do conclusions, we will have the risk of generalize an observation that we are having in 1 year and extrapolate that with all the students, right? So in order to avoid that, we are going to look at reproducibility. So can I collect enough data that is not only 1 semester on 2018, but can I collect multiple years and see if there is a trend or a pattern? So we are looking for reproducibility. So actually, that is one topic that we have. It's always a good idea because whenever you are looking at the impact and how you measure things, like maybe you are doing a questionnaire. So the way that you are going to identify, okay, this is a pattern here, is it significantly different or not, you should have reach out to a statistician in order to know that. Or you are missing that. And that is one thing that we are going to be mentioning when you are designing the experimental plan. Since you have to apply for an IRB, you want to have everything up front. Because you don't want to go back and if you need informed consent from the student, you're not going to be reaching out to them because maybe some of them have graduated and you cannot reach them anymore. Another approach for that is collaboration. I'm jumping myself. But you could have much more significant data if it's not only yourself doing the research, but you engage other faculty in other classrooms within your institution. And that way you can have a meaningful data. And then about long-term impact is about retention. So basically, the things that I'm observing, is it impacting the long term of our students? Are we helping our students to graduate better? Are we helping the students to find a job that is more meaningful for them? Or are we impacting, I don't know, the scores if any of you have to do a final exam for graduation, things like that. So we will come back to your research questions and see how we can connect those things with the experimental plan. So always start small. I know that you get very excited when I have gone to some of the workshop on scholarship teaching. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm going to do this with my whole classes on all the things I'm teaching. And then you end up not doing well. So I will ask you to start really small, to start thinking, how are you going to design your approach and the data that you need to collect first, as we mentioned earlier, and ask for help. And also not only that, like when you are looking at your hypothesis or your question, what do you need, what is going to be your outcome, right? So for, let's say, efficacy of interventions, right? You will have to look at, is there an improvement? I don't know who said efficacy, or when we are talking about underperformance, how do you define underperformance? Because maybe a C for a student that always got a C is not underperformance. He is always a C, right? So we have to really define what are those patterns, what are those assessments, what are the outcomes. Collaborate with colleagues to help us interpreting the stats if you are not familiar with that, or questionnaires. And then collaborate with other faculty. It's much more powerful when you have an interdisciplinary observation. So basically you are assessing how students are learning in different environments. Or perhaps a specific generation. I know that there is now a stigma with the millennials. Well, there's not all the things are bad, also good things. So can we extrapolate? Can we look forward in different disciplines? How do I measure outcomes? So there are going to be quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis. So basically, for those of you who are in science, number-driven or perception-driven, okay? So how can we do quantitative? So basically, we're going to be measuring how much our students learn. And sadly, the only way that we can see is looking at the scores, right? That is a number. What are the grades of our students, right? Or for retention, can we do a surprise exam one semester later and measure how much did they retain? We are looking at a number. We can do a survey, and it's like Likert scale from 1 to 5, right? That will give you a number. That is a survey, and it's going to give us a quantitative data. However, in the recent years, more and more journals that are publishing in education are more concerned about what is behind the number. So basically, those comments, when you leave an open box, what is the message? What are the keywords there? So that will be actually a mix. It will be qualitative data, because you are going to identify keywords and analyze those. So then with the qualitative data.
So there's a couple of different ways you can approach qualitative data as well. I'm going to talk specifically about the 3 in red, because those are the ones I've published in those areas, but there's others as well, as you can see. So case study research, again, in education, we like to describe things. We're wordy, and we like to describe a lot of stuff. So in case study research, that's where a researcher goes in and studies a specific case, right? They go in and they look at, they have a question, they're describing it through a lot of data, like you're drowning in the qualitative data, there's just so much to have themes emerge from, and that's how you sort of present a case of, within this context, this is what occurred. In my own personal experience with case study research, I have done single case studies. I've also done cross case studies where I've looked at different teachers in different contexts with the same question in mind and said, now how do they look across one another? What themes are coming out in both, which is what Marina was saying earlier here. For teacher inquiry or practitioner research, this is where the teacher actually does the research in the classroom. They implement the intervention, and then they study it. They go through the same process that we would as a researcher coming from the outside. They collect the data, they analyze it, it's recursive, they reflect, they keep going back, asking the questions, seeing if they need more information. But the difference between those two is that it's not a researcher, it's not somebody from the outside coming in to study them. Typically, teacher research is not quite as published, and when I say teacher research, I don't mean us in this room, I mean K-12 teachers, but it is becoming more widely spread at conference presentations and also within our organizations, and really recognized as an important piece in our field. We're really talking a lot about collaborating with teachers, working with them, publishing with them. We do a lot of work here at WVU with our partnering schools so that our teachers get those experiences, they get those professional experiences so that they can then bring it back to the classrooms as well. And then formative and design experiments really, in my mind, they're a combination of qualitative and quantitative, but not quite as much as a mixed methods. So it's more interested, this particular design is more interested in looking at describing the context rather than looking at the intervention work, okay? And then, as Marina said earlier, surveys can also be used in qualitative research. Obviously, may not be a Likert scale, but it could be an open-ended question where you would collect information and then code it appropriately. And we don't want you to think that we didn't know or forgot about mixed methods, but what we wanted to show is that you can take a combination of these things and put them together to present a mixed methods design. And as she said earlier, really, even in education, we're looking more towards bringing in the numbers, where some of you are looking more into bringing in the qualitative pieces as well, okay? So that interdisciplinary work is very important to all of us.
Okay, so what we did in this case was the following. We basically are presenting an example of a survey. This is a survey that has been already published, okay? So colleges use a variety of technology tools to assist with assessment and accountability efforts, okay? So these tools vary widely and include reports on the engagement and success of individual students, early warning systems, and the collection of data on cohorts of students, okay? So what I'm doing here is giving you an example of how questions in a survey looks like, okay? So if we take a look at number one, they are basically asking you in a scale from 5 to 1, okay, how strongly you agree or disagree with any of the following statements, okay? So these assessment efforts seem primarily focused on satisfying outside groups such as creditors or politicians, okay? If we take a look and if we were to answer these questions, okay, do you think that it's basically okay for me to ask you these questions in the context of where we are right now? How do you feel? Okay, do I have IRB approval to ask you this? Have I consented you to do this? Okay, everything that I'm doing right now is completely illegal, okay? So these are things that you have to consider when you're doing a research project, okay? So you need IRB. The people from the IRB office will tell you whether you have to consent or not, the student, depending on the type of project that you are developing, okay? Keep in mind that some projects are going to be exempt, some project will have to go over expedite versus full review, okay? But this is definitely completely illegal, okay, to do in the context of the classroom. once you are ready to publish, as Marina mentioned earlier, there are different places where you can go for publishing, okay? We have, for instance, International Journal for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, Journal of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, College Teaching, American Society for Engineering Education. They do have a publication, okay? Journal of Engineering Education, I happen to be in engineering, so those are the most popular for us. But as Marina mentioned earlier, every main group has a subgroup, okay, that do educational research. I know biology has a big component on education.
Best resource for you is to check with your librarian. Believe it or not, discuss with her what you want to publish. She will identify key journals for you. I have just summarized a few of them based on the audience that we have here, but I can provide a whole list for Amy if you feel like you need to find more information.
Okay. The other thing I want to mention is the following. You came up with some topics, okay, but once you have those topics, you have to go further because you truly have to develop questions that can be measurable, that are unique, okay, questions that are grounded on theory. Okay, so here basically what we have is truly a list of topics that you guys can use to develop your own questions. Okay, in terms of point to remember.
So just some points to remember that good practice can be grounded in multiple theoretical frames. So we listed out the frames earlier, but you can use more than one to support what you're looking at from different lenses. And that data can assume quite different meanings when you use different theories to talk about them, which is interesting when you get to that conclusion section and you're able to talk about it from multiple perspectives.
Okay, so what it says is the following. SoTL is an area of scholarship that does not solve problems once and for all, okay? The challenges of teaching and learning are persistent, okay? And those of us that have been here for a long time, okay, we know that they evolve, okay? They mutate as grow as new disciplines are invented, new challenges of practice emerge, and especially when we get new generations of students, okay? And we're talking about both students and faculty come to inhabit and define our classrooms and institutions, okay? So as I said, this generation that we're seeing right now is completely different from the generations that I had. I've been here for almost 10 years. And we basically come up with new questions, new problems on almost a daily basis. To remind you that there will be other workshops, so stay tuned, okay? I want to answer questions. We have a few minutes for questions. Keep in mind that we had no time to go over all the questions, okay? But you can go home, answer them, and think, reflect about whether, especially whether SoTL is for you or not, okay? If you want to pursue SoTL or not. Basically have specific instructions on what you have to follow, okay? Truly, when you go through the IRB is when you know if you need or not consent. Okay, I will tell you that I thought I did not need to consent my students when I thought about the project, but they told me that I had to consent my students. So at my first day of classes, I give one consent form. I allowed them to ask questions. I have to show them the questions that they are going to answer throughout the whole semester ahead of time, because that's part of my consent. But that's truly what guides my approach, whatever the IRB approval decides, okay, or the process decides. Did I answer you?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I just wanted to add to the IRB real quick. They're very quick to get back, particularly with this type of research, because I don't want to say that it's not intense and make it and diminish it, but it's just not the same level of consent and things. So if you submit an IRB proposal, you hear back relatively quickly with either you're going to get it or you're not, and here's what you need to do in order to get it. So don't let that be the reason that you don't do this type of research, because at first it's a cumbersome process, and then once you get through it once or twice, you're like, okay, I can do this. But do it before you start, because you don't want to end up like Liz was saying, you don't want to end up with all your data and then not be able to use it because you didn't go through the appropriate channels. And you have to have that in order to publish and disseminate.
One of the key points is also to determine whether or not you are going to be collecting the data anonymously or not. So imagine that you are doing a survey, but you don't know who a student is doing what. That will be, most of the scenarios will be an exempt. But still, you have to present that survey to the IRB so they can judge that none of the questions are going to trigger any kind of issue with any student or identify students by the questions.
Or does the survey or whatever you're doing interfere with the class? In other words, maybe the class is not as effective because I'm doing these experiments. Who makes that judgment? That's a concern of mine.
IRB won't tell you about
IRB would make
education.
that
No,
decision.
it's more about the well-being of the student and is it ethical or it's not ethical. Basically, imagine that right now you are in a situation of power, right? So now it can be like a coercion, like you are forcing the students to answer something. When it's voluntarily, you should be stating this is not going to be affecting your grades. It's only if you want it.
Right, right.
My question is, I'm sorry, just what are the major flaws in the design of experiments for scholarship of learning that you see? Like when you have the data and you say, oh, I can't publish this because I did something wrong.
Mismatch research question and your experimental method. That's one of the things. That
Outcomes, looking at outcomes and not looking at the outcomes, but your hypothesis is not fitting the outcome. That will be another one.
And I would say generalizability. So, it's really a matter of selecting the right methodological stance. If you select, like in my world, one teacher to study, you can't call that an experimental design. It's a case study. So not aligning and actually calling what you're doing, what you're actually doing. There's nothing wrong with case study research, but just say what you're doing. So I think that would be like that mismatch again of what you say you're doing and then how you present it.
Yeah.
You and I are working on, so I'm working on a project with Marina right now where we had match data, not only across the course in question, but like we were matching GPA and performance in some other courses, and we had to do a full review. It wasn't actually expedited, so we had to do a full consent, and you just have to plan for the time to get it through the process. No, it took probably, by the time we made the rounds of revisions that IRB asked for, we probably had it within a month. But I started in the semester before we wanted to do it because you don't want to get caught not being able to collect data because you're not approved yet. But that is just something to keep in mind. We had to do a full consent on those students.
And even for publications nowadays, journals will ask you, can you attach a statement or the letter from the IRB? So if it's an exempt, is it expedited or full?
I would just add for IRB that I don't want to look like I'm a paranoid person, but regardless of the research that I choose to put forward, and sometimes with case study research, because it's a single subject, they might say it does not need an IRB approval. However, I like to have that official letter from WVU that says this was put up for review and we view it as not needing an approval or however they state it. But I like to have that in my file just for my own clarification, for the teacher that I'm working with so that they know, so that my department chair knows, and so that it's very transparent, the work that I'm doing. And when you do submit something like that, it gets turned around very quickly if the IRB doesn't want to look at it. I complete I submit just like I would if I was thinking it was going to go for expedited or exempt. I put everything in there so that they can see it. And then they kick back a letter that says, based upon our initial review, da-da-da-da-da. But I like having that signed PDF from WVU on file for the work that I do.
If I were going to try some different teaching techniques,
Yeah.
maybe I was going to have a certain topic where the students worked with each other, flipped classroom, if you like. And then some other topics where I used 6 different multimedia things to try to see if they could understand it better, whatever. And then I took that group of students and I flipped them over, and one group got one input, the other group got another input. I assessed them, and then I flipped them so that it was fair. In my opinion, that class may suffer because I'm doing these things that I haven't done in this class before. So by the end of the semester, the student's outcome may not be as good because I'm doing my experiments on them. What's your thinking on that? And, I mean, is that kind of no good?
So I would say start small, right, and achieving for a whole semester. Maybe you can, the first semester, implement only one thing.
Okay.
You want to try the flip and then the video, so maybe the whole class will be exposed to both of the things. And maybe you can have a survey at the end. And this won't be for publishing. That is for your perception, for your learning. And you ask, was this useful? Did you learn from this? And then once you know that it's no harm, basically you are going to improve the learning, then I will jump into, okay, now I'm going to really assess and prove that this concept is meaningful for them. That's what I will do. That is what I will do. I don't know.
I would just add that that's really an inquiry stance, right? You're looking to see if an intervention that you're choosing, which is whatever a multimodal, whatever you're going to try, is working with a group of students. And so what you're going to do is you're going to try that intervention, you're taking that inquiry stance, you're basing that intervention, I would think, on sound research in the field. So from what the field says, this is not a harmful practice. This is a best practice in teaching. And so now you're going to implement it within your context. And really that's inquiry. You're looking at it, as long as you take that stance and do it through a systematic way of collecting and implementation, you're actually following through teaching and learning. If you document it and go through the IRB and those sorts of things, then you could then write that up as a piece. But that's what we were talking about selecting the right theoretical position, grounding your work in effective practice within your discipline, and then trying it and seeing if it works. And I would say try it, I think, but as Marina was saying, definitely start small. You don't want to have all of the things that you labeled there, because you won't be able to see, there's too many variables. You won't be able to see what actually made the change, positive or negative. But then you can critique your work and reflect on your work to adjust it and tinker with it so that it does get better. And that's the whole point of scholarship of teaching and learning, is to make our teaching better. And then not only ours, but to get it out there so that everybody can be like, hey, that worked with these students in this context, so I'm going to try it in my room.
Thank you.